Sure. So pretty much everyone calls me Chuck. I am a ordained American Baptist pastor. I was pastor there in Hartford for 17 years at Memorial Baptist Church over near Trinity College. And I've been a chaplain for the Department of Correction 15 years. And then the last 4 years, a supervisor, supervising all the chaplains for the Department of Correction. So about 19 years in the department. So I met Edward about 10 years ago, I think. So I used to work at the Osborne Correctional Institution in Summers, and we had 5 chaplains there, Jewish, Native American, Protestant, Catholic, and Muslim. So Edward used to come down, and we had our own hallway going down towards where the chapels are. So we had about 4 offices in there. So Edward would come in. The closest office when you first come in was the Catholic chaplain. So he would stop in there and talk to the Catholic chaplain. And then he would come and see me. I was second best. I was number 2. So he would come in and talk to me typically, and we would talk about everything you could imagine. But frequently, I think, well, probably the 2 things we talked about most were ideas he had for trying to help people when he got out, so others might not make the same mistake or end up in the same place he had in prison. And then we would, talk about different things going on in his life and so on. But typically, the conversation and his interest always revolved around trying to help other people. And so, as a chaplain, that's the kind of thing that makes an impression on you, and that, you appreciate. And then when he was done with me, he would go talk to the Muslim chaplain, typically Yasser. Yasser, Edward, and I remain very close friends. Actually, I talked to Yasser today, Edward, and I don't know if he reached out to you, but we want to have lunch a week from tomorrow, next Friday after Ramadan's over. So Yasser is a retired chaplain now, like I said, Muslim chaplain, and I actually hired him to be a consultant or advisor for the Department of Correction, because Islam is not my expertise, and there's, there can be some tricky things for us to try to figure out, and trying to protect the inmates' religious rights, constitutional rights, and so on. So Yasser helps me a lot with that, with his 20 years of experience, and having learned and an incredible intellect and very positive spirit. I would say Yasser and I are closer spiritually than I am with most Protestants that I've met. So he's just an incredible guy. So Edward would go and talk to him, and we just got to know each other over the years. And Edward was constantly coming up with ideas for how might I put a program together that would help people either who are already incarcerated, or people who were formerly incarcerated, or help people before they might possibly be incarcerated. So we spent a lot of time. I think he showed me a couple of really formal, well thought out business proposals before he ever left the prison. And then when he got out, he immediately started continuing with his college education. Um, Edward moved, I don't think, Edward, you're not originally from the Hartford area, I don't believe. But he was sent to the Hartford area to be in a halfway house when he first got out. And if I remember correctly, his thinking was, this might be a good idea because I'm not familiar with the area, not familiar with the city. Then I won't be tempted to fall in with old friends or hang out with people who might not have my best interest at heart. So uh, the first, well, we stayed in touch, but the first 6 months he was out, we didn't stay in touch as much as we do now because I'm still an active employee for the Department of Correction. And so our rules forbid us to be in social contact with former people who were formerly incarcerated if they're still under supervision. So once Edward was off supervision, it made it much easier. So I'm I'm not going to admit to breaking the rules and seeing him anyway, but that could have happened. I don't know. I wasn't really paying attention to the dates, uh, but I was watching him. He immediately became, almost immediately became, I won't say, Edward, you can correct me on it. I won't say the title right, but kind of a case manager, supervisor in a halfway house, and had a, a very gifted manner of conversing and relating to and supervising the residents there. So, you know, as an old white guy who has limited understanding on the issues of mass incarceration and race and racism and things like that, you know, when I talk to people who are involved in the justice system, it's nowhere near as effective as when someone like Edward speaks to them because, you know, he knows the language, he knows what they've been through, he knows what they're going to be tempted to do and potentially break the law before they know what they're going to be tempted to do and potentially break the law. So so he's continued to do that. I think he's working in a different place now. He actually works full time on second shift and darn near full time on first shift. So on the second shift, he gets paid and, you know, his work, but his passion is what we're talking about today with the SCRIP program, with going back into the jails and the prisons to help those who are incarcerated to begin the process of educating, working with them, and then continuing that process once they're out so that they can build a strong foundation and potentially never go back to jail or back to prison again. So for me, that's a high priority. And one of the reasons I really have supported and stayed in touch with Edward is because he it's hard enough to get out of jail after more than 2 decades, get a job, try to be sane, get used to free society, get used to all the choices you have. I mean, imagine never getting to pick what you eat for 20 years or more, never having to be able to pick what your breakfast, lunch, or dinner is going to be. And then imagine going to the grocery store where we've all been and just imagine the produce section with all the fruit and the colors. You got 6 different kinds of apples and just all these different choices when you have never had a choice like that in 2 decades. So the stress level, even good and fun and exciting things, is still stress on your body. Trying to find people you can have confidence in and talk to and be vulnerable with. Um, when you've had to protect yourself and act like a tough guy and pretend you're never afraid and all of that, you have this, Edward will talk more about it, but this hyper masculinity in the prison setting, and to try to come out and just be a healthy man and get away from that hyper masculinity, the very unhealthy, you know, I don't want to get into sermons and stuff, but patriarchal issues and masculine issues, those things are not only bad for our society, but it's bad for us as men. So to learn how to be, the kind, compassionate, gracious gentleman that he is in a world where, who do you talk to? And now that he's paying his own rent, he can't afford to live in a place like where I live. So he's in still a section of Hartford that isn't the best section. So it's not really safe to be best friends with his neighbors. So he's got to find people he can talk to, know the people to stay away from. So Edward he's learned an awful lot. One of the things that breaks my heart when we talk, Edward will say, I miss being in prison with you guys, because I could come in and talk to you, the chaplains, every day. Now I don't have anyone to talk to. Every day it's the real world that every single one of you deal with. You have people to talk to, hopefully, but it's not, it's a different world. It's a different mechanism for getting through the day. And so that first year or 2 years was depressing, lonely, heartbreaking for me to hear about. So Edward has taken all of these experiences and come up with a really well-written curriculum that helps men or women, but so far it's designed for men. I don't know if he may have had some women in his program. And so as I talk, I've mostly worked with male inmates. So when I talk about men, it's not that I don't care about the women. I wouldn't feel that competent being a chaplain in the women's facility, because there are some different issues, a lot of different issues. So, but nonetheless, he's developed this program so to help people to begin the process of getting away from the really unhealthy coping mechanisms that everyone develops in jail or in prison, begin the process of, kind of living with one foot outside the door, becoming more pro-social. And he does a really good job of touching on issues of trauma. So, every one of you who are listening have been affected by trauma. You have trauma in your heart. Your heart's been broken. Your heart, we have scars in our heart. In our faith community, God finds these beautiful ways of kind of stitching up those scars and that brokenness in our heart if we'll allow it. But the scars, the marks are there for us always to essentially see and feel. And so what Edward has developed is a program to help the participants recognize the trauma. So if you think about, and he's the expert on this, I'm certainly not, but think about, so someone like Edward, who in some ways is typical, in some ways not typical of the inmate population, but Edward experienced trauma before he ever went to prison in multiple ways. And so I'll let him talk about that. It's his expertise. But, being in an urban area, being surrounded by poverty, being in places where there's not a grocery store, there isn't employment, there aren't opportunities for you to help your mom or your dad, but often it's a single mom survive. So a lot goes on. Often you see your mom being abused, so that's traumatic. Your mom might be an addict, that's traumatic. You might be out buying drugs on the street for your mom, that's traumatic. Your mom might be the one sending you out on the street, or your dad, to sell the drugs, that's traumatic. And then you grow up with the violence, and for you, it's normal. You know, every one of us, when we grew up as youngsters, we thought our home was normal until we got to a certain age and we realized, no, it wasn't. Our home was probably dysfunctional, just like every other home. But the dysfunction in my home wasn't even close to being similar to the dysfunction that you sometimes frequently will see in some of the urban areas, such as how Edward grew up. So you take that trauma and then the violence on top of that, and then maybe the violence you created because of what's happened to you. And then eventually you get caught, and then you go to jail, you go to prison, you spend time there. There's more trauma, more violence. And then you get out and you have trauma on top of trauma on top of trauma. And so Edward has a curriculum for addressing that, helping, especially, I think, I hope I don't say the wrong thing. If I offend you, by all means, tell me, you know, say ouch and tell me you're being a jerk, because that's how I learn. But I think women sometimes are able to process trauma and talk about it. But as men, we're kind of disabled when it comes to talking about our feelings and trauma and our pain. And so, you know, we're really good with two emotions, anger and rage. We're not really good at much else. We can learn, and we do learn, but it's not so easy. So, and that's not an excuse, but we're not that easy at learning that. So Edward does that process of, one, talking about some of the trauma he's been through. And so when you do that, when you talk about it, it gives permission for the participants, and then they'll have the courage to talk about their trauma. And one of the things I found amazing, and it will choke me up if I talk about it too much, but you have men who might be 40, 50, 60 years old who have never told another living human being about the abuse they suffered and the trauma that has been affecting them in their heart. So Edward gets to that pretty quick, and that's necessary, because without, and again, I'm talking about his expertise, but without addressing that trauma, you end up, you might get the job, you might get some housing, you might have some food in your belly, but that lingering pain, it's too much to take. And I'll let Edward talk about some of the overdoses and suicides that he encountered as a supervisor in the halfway house. Was 3 in a very, very short period of time. And again, so heartbreaking to see and to hear about this in such a short period of time. And the statistics bear out, you know, a formerly incarcerated person is something like 256 times more likely to die of a drug overdose the first 2 weeks after prison than the general public. That's actually, I quoted that in my paper I wrote for my doctorate in 2008 or 2007 when I wrote the paper. So that's, you know, an old statistic. Now with fentanyl, that those overdose figures are probably even higher. We see it quite frequently. So Edward developed this program where, and then COVID hit. He was supposed to come in May of, well, he was coming into some of the prisons, but we're trying to get him in now virtually. You would think we'd have the technology, but our department, our funding is always limited by what the legislature gives us, and that's limited on what all of us as citizens will allow. So we're funded well to do like the real security stuff, but not really for the program stuff and technology. So we've spent a lot of money since COVID started just trying to get the ability to do what we're doing right now in visiting rooms or in a classroom. And I'm honestly only aware of one virtual class, college class taking place in the DOC right now. And the reason I'm aware of it is they have to actually plug into an outlet in the chaplain's office to get internet access so the college can pipe in to the students who sit in the chapel at that facility. So we're trying to get that set up so Edward can do the same thing and begin his program, again, working with guys on the inside and then following with them on the outside. So that was a pretty long introduction, and I apologize. I'm a pastor. I talk a lot. I know I talk a lot, and I still do it, and I know better. So Edward, why don't you jump in and fill out the holes and correct what I said that was incorrect.
Thanks a lot, Reverend Williams. Again, my name is Edward Andrews. SCRIP. Like I said, SCRIP stands for Second Chance Reentry Initiative Program. What SCRIP is a social service initiative. It's a social service initiative that evaluates historic, um, historic challenges that affecting the minorities or the urban communities. And so I built like a life trauma focus so we can help transform lives and their family lives. I'm a participant. One thing, a little backdrop about me. I could be caught, from the age of 5, getting abused by my father. My father he don't use belts. He used to use extension cords, and I used to see him abusing my mother at the same time. But my mother used to always be at work. She's a telephone operator, came from North Carolina to live a life in New York City. And when she go to work, he used to, humiliate me in front of his guys because, he's an alcoholic. And when he beat me, he used to tell me to smile. Things like that, like torture me for no reason. And, I hate to say it, but at that moment, I used to hate him, you know. And when I used to see him hit my mother, I used to try to, at this young age, try to defend my mother, and I used to get the worst of him again. And so it took me time when I had to look out the window to see if I could get some type of solace. And when I looked out the window, I used to see all type of crimes happening, addicts, guys enjoying themselves, listening to music, but using drugs, being around a lot of girls. So um that kind of fixed my mind into this must be where I could get peace at. And so the year 87, I could never forget. Um my parents divorced. After they divorced, my father died. After he died, my mother bought a house. She thought, living this a new life. So she told me to come over. And when she looked at my eyes at the table, you could see tears in her eyes because she see that and what she and my mother was a very church goer, heavy into church. She used to sew all the gowns for the whole church, cooked on Sundays for the whole church, you know. And when she looked in my eyes, she saw what she instilled in me was taken away by the streets. And so that day I went to this the year that I got shot twice, and I got shot twice. I I was just living wild. drinking. I was drinking every day, you know, following my things that my father used to do. I used to follow those traps, not knowing that the disease of addiction at that moment. And so to make it short, she told me to spend the night with her. I spent the night with her. And then I got a phone call at 3 o'clock. 3 o'clock, it was my daughter's mother. Well, by the way, I'm just going to cut right there. My daughter's mother, I just came back from New York just now in real life, and she had passed away. And so I had to go to New York, stay out there just to comfort my daughter. Um, and that was brutal for me to see my ex-wife in the casket. But anyway, she called me. She was drinking that night. I went out there to the Bronx. Come to find out, I got stabbed. And so I was in the hospital, and my sister came, and I managed to open my eyes with all of these machines, all these things connected to me. And it was crying. And I was like, don't cry, but don't tell mommy I got stabbed. And she said, you tell her. And I'm looking like this, you know, the ping pong thing. You tell her. And then I said, tell me what? And that's when they revealed that, you know, my mother died that morning. And so I don't know. I just don't know how I'm here today because I didn't want to live no more. So my heart turned cold next to my mother's. And that happened for a while. And then at the year 93, I ended up in Connecticut facing 85 years. So the picture I'm trying to show you, what I didn't know at the moment, is how that built up trauma had led me to make bad decisions. How I try to substitute my pain with pleasure instead of my inner happiness. My self-esteem was washed away because of, you know, my father. My self-identity was washed away because of my father. And that's why I hated myself, because I had to keep on questioning my ability and my competence. If I felt I didn't have my ability, then you know, it don't come just an individual reaction. It become a social issue. And that's why my father hated me, by the way, because he hated himself. So anything that looked like him or sound like him, he hated them too. I know that today, and I love my father anyway, you know, but he just had his issue. So anyway, so my intervention came while I was in prison. I was hearing teachers mark at guys who couldn't hardly read or write, but they was adults. And I didn't like that. I just felt, you know, like I just felt crazy, man. So I had became an academic tutor, and I had became a mentor for all substance abuse programs. I was the go-to guy when guys first come in. I'll send them to any type of the religion services with Reverend Williams, or I send them to the G basement to get some type of clothing. I mean, I was fortunate enough they would give me clothing rather than some COs. And that's why, you know, I keep on telling Reverend Williams that jail has spoiled me like that, because, you know, I used to get around and used to be able to sit down. So I did that. I served 22 years. I got out March the 10th, 4:37 a.m. in the morning. And when I got out, I had to face a whole lot of new stresses. The first stresses was how I'm gonna react, how the world gonna accept me, how I'm going to adjust and adapt. And then when I got out, it was, you know, a new type of stresses, like how to use a bus pass, how to get a job, how to be socializing. So it took a long time for me to get a job. When I went to Amazon and tried to get a job, and they learned about my past, they pretty much escorted me out of there during an interview. So those was more stresses was just, I don't know. I could have easily went back, but I know that with my determinations and my resilience nature, I'm gonna keep on. I finally got a job at Restaurant Depot, and then eventually I was at a halfway house. In the halfway house, I was a case manager. What my duties was to give them a plan because I could identify with them. One thing about prison, or one thing about inner city, they say that light travel faster than sounds. So if you given, if you put us in a room with some type of instructor, right away we're gonna try to stereotype. Uh, saying we got this type of bias on us that they can't tell us nothing because they didn't come from where we come from. That come out of pain. That come out of an area of pain. So I became a case manager, and so I could identify with the guys. I got them jobs. I got them, housing stability. But just imagine for 1 minute, just reflect how a guy could be in your office happy as can be that he finished the program, happy, joy, happy. I finally made it, and they give you a hug and tell you thank you, and then 5 hours left as he's discharged, you found out that he's dead. It still saddens me because I still feel guilty that I didn't do greater for these guys. And so that made me know that there's a missing component with these programs that a lot of these people are offering to save lives, not just for numbers. They didn't agree with me. They just wanted these guys, they wanted these guys to figure out what they're doing. They talking about these guys come back and forth. Yes. When the guys are dealing with trauma, it's not like they are bad guys. It's just that we want to know what happened to them. So we try to go underneath the surface to try to get under that layers of pain or the layers of, you know, psychological issues. And that's what we do at SCRIP. I built SCRIP. It's a 501c3. It's a 4-phase program. I deal a lot with emotional regulations because I know that inside of prison, we will give them the emotional regulations, but when they get out, we got to go over again emotional regulations because there's going to be some new stresses that they're going to have to face. I deal with psychological detox because that bias attitude, we got to get rid of those toxic attitudes and those thoughts. I deal with hypermasculinity. Once you raise in a certain area, you grow on these certain traits and you conduct yourself in that way in order for in order to be accepted. Nah, we erase all of that so somebody could rediscover who they are and want to become something else rather than, feeling like they are secondhand. And the second phase, we deal with social responsibility. Once you know how to do that, it's your responsibility to go back to your community and your family to just try to help guide them and lead them in a better directions. Now, when we tell, I'm telling you this because I don't give up easy on trauma. Trauma is, we got a specific intervention approach with trauma. I'm not only dealing with psychoeducation, I'm dealing with all of these hidden burdens that prevent us from being successful. When I say successful, I don't mean having $1,000,000. I mean to have that inner happiness, to understand and to accept you who you are, and to understand to be that emotional intelligence to know that we know what it is when we see others in those type of, distorted views and all of that. So we try to extend ourselves out of generosity to help them. Once trauma land on somebody, it's a struggle for that person to return from that trauma. That trauma could be a barrier for someone could get connected to God. I know we all in church right now, but I know that growing up, y'all gotta know experience. Somebody said, y'all see that somebody was like going to church every Sunday, and then somehow they stopped going. And then you found and you call them, what happened? What happened? Oh, I'm going through something right now. I'll return after a while. It's because sometimes that trauma lands on them and then it shaped their whole paradigm. Their focus becomes school. And so this is what the trauma do. Is don't make you get connected to your creator. It don't make you get connected to yourself. This is a strong thing right here. The third phase we do is career development. I'm tied up with a lot of job opportunities where guys can just get jobs. Right now, it's a hot commodity because all these job all these places is looking for people to work, but they just don't know where to go to find them at times. And the last part is expert mentoring. That means when somebody graduate, I always check up on them. I just checked up on all the guys who graduated last year. I checked them on them last week. 8 of them still working. One of them got jumped and got beat up. And then they say they use the emotional regulation that they got. And then they go for, retaliation. They just took it and moved further and know that they can't mess with that girl who he got involved with. And so what I'm trying to extend myself to y'all is that I made bad choices. I don't point my finger at nobody except me because I made the choices, but a lot of my trauma had a lot to do with the choices that I made in life. And because I understand this, it's my duty, it's my responsibility to try to extend myself to as many people as I can to help prevent them from keep on going in the wrong route. I know if y'all in your community, y'all tired of seeing panhandlers. I mean, y'all tired of seeing people y'all know is on drugs. Now, I'm not saying that script gonna save the world. I'm just gonna say that script gonna save a lot of the lives that enter into script from the world. And I'm open to any questions. I'm sorry if I took too long. I didn't really. I'm excited to be here, and I'm excited to be around you. I'm open to any questions, and so we probably could move further.
Hey, Edward, would you mind telling us? So I know you just mentioned career, counseling and helping people find jobs that, for some people, they don't know that when you go to apply for a job or apply to live in an apartment and you have to disclose that you had a felony charge or whatever, that can totally jeopardize what you are able to do. Would you mind even just sharing with us some of the places that are more willing to hire people who have felony charges? Like, what are some of the stores? And the reason I'm asking is because I think that the approach to this can be very holistic. And I think if we know some of these places, we can then on the outside support those places. So if you wouldn't mind just sharing with us, so we know.
Sure. Um, they have a to answer that question. They also have a act out now. Whereas if an employee hire you, they could get tax exempt from something like that. But let me tell you one thing I forgot to tell you that right now I have under the script we have a doctor, we have 2 licensed clinicians, and we also have a psychiatrist. It's like so you're coming to us. We coming to society with a holistic approach. But some of those jobs that give an opportunity, like right now, the owner, not the H&R, but the owner of Valvoline, for one, had met with me Tuesday. So Florida State University had partnered with me because that's where I model my curriculum from. They're evidence based. And they love the work that I'm doing. So they partner with me. And what they want to do with me is do training to show police officers, correctional officers, or any agencies that give services to marginalized populations. They want to do a training for them to show them what these people are really going through trauma wise, so they can know how to approach them and know how to address them instead of thinking that they're the lowest person on earth. Okay, so we got Restaurant Depot, we got um, YG Cleaning Services, Sister Soldiers, Valvoline, and that's it for me for right now.
And
That's great.
bears.
And Bears, yeah, but I haven't sent nobody to Bears. I'm saying these are the people who call me to send them out. Like right now, Valvoline, like 13 people. I don't have anybody because I can't just send anybody because my credibility, or I don't want to stop nobody, but we trying to hurry up and do some type of cohort so we can start sending guys out. That's what I'm looking for, just to do recruiting, do another class, and so we can start sending people out. And the last thing I forgot to mention is that we got this other program called CARE program. CARE program is a comprehensive adult reentry. It's for when guys don't have, they homeless. They could be homeless, or their time ran out of the halfway house. They don't have nowhere to go, or they coming out from prison and don't have nowhere to go. So we have put them in. We're trying to do this. Put them in the CARE program. The CARE program is a 9 months program, whereas we've renting out rooms. Instead of paying for the room, we want the 6 months you just to concentrate on the Ascend program. Once you do the Ascend program, then you know what you're doing, you know, now how to address your traumas. Then we can send you out for jobs. And then when you get to jobs, if you successfully graduate from the CARE program, Regal Realty had included that they will give them a 1-bedroom apartment if they successfully graduate from the Ascend program.
So the reason I brought up bears, Edward and Jordan, I think Jordan was trying to get at, like, are there certain businesses that we could support and encourage them and let them know that we appreciate that they hire ex-offenders. So Bears food truck actually came to our office building a couple days ago, and which was great. And everyone I saw between then and now, I talked about Bears, and I said they have good food. If you never had the food, their barbecue is quite excellent. But the thing I love most about Bears is that they do hire a lot of ex-offenders. And
Thank you.
so that's what I tell everyone at work. I really love Bears. Yeah, they have great food, but they hire the formerly incarcerated, and a lot of people don't do that. So, that makes me, I don't know these people, but it makes me proud of them, and it makes me proud to do business with them.
And the
And
last,
Laz Parking also, right, Edward?
I forgot, yes, on last parking, right now they're looking for like 22 people, 22 employees. But yeah, this is where SCRIP is at. SCRIP is just it don't want to be a program. It wanted to be the program. I'm trying to address little things that people overlook, but have a great significance of someone's decision and the way they feel. Did I answer your question on Reverend Jordan?
Yes, thank you so much. And thank you it really is important, because not everybody is like the body of Christ. Everybody has a different way that they can support, or they're called to do good in the world. And we make choices every day, like where we spend our money, how we spend our time. And I, as both of you just responded and gave me a bunch of places, like I want to ensure that we as a church are like, we buy most of our materials for our Sunday community dinners at Restaurant Depot. So now the next time I go there, like, I am going to make sure that I talk to the manager, who I have a very good relationship with, and just tell him
Tomorrow, Frank.
I appreciate this. Yeah, yeah. So this is a wonderful, because it's also about relationship.
Yes.
And so I appreciate you sharing that with us.
Yes.
I want to throw two things out there. One, what Edward said about the clinical workers he has people with clinical expertise. So as he's touching trauma, believe it or not, when we enter into and we engage and we recognize and we talk about that trauma, it's quite therapeutic. Some people will or could have a breakdown, and so Edward has a clinical plan for that, and people that can help. But I've actually seen it happen probably a few hundred times in prison, where inmates have looked at the trauma and never seen them need any kind of clinical intervention, because they do it in a community with people like Edward, and they have actually someone to talk to in their housing area pretty much 24/7. So I'm glad he has that, and it's the responsible thing. But I think what a lot of the participants are going to need the most is, beyond the trauma, is that the depression, the psychological issues that are related to the trauma, but are even more complicated than that. And so having those resources is really essential. The other thing I wanted to throw out is that I know Silent Hill Congregational Church is a part, I don't know how much GIA is doing with COVID and all, but has been a part of the organization for GIA. And there's a couple of prison issues in their plank, they're what they're trying to do of achievable goals, which I really appreciate. So I love that your church community cares enough about the community to be involved in an organization like that, that's taken a big, broad view of some of the issues, all of which are actionable and achievable and will improve the quality of life for so many people. So I hope to hear more about them and from them before long. But none, our legislature's acting. They're in session. They're making decisions right now that affect, our lives, but especially the lives of those who are involved in the so-called criminal justice system. And I have to be careful what I say, because I am still employed. But, our justice system isn't really full of justice. And, mass incarceration, which I'm sure you're all very familiar with, the United States is the leader. We incarcerate more of our citizens per capita than any country in the world. I find that fascinating in a sense, but how do we justify that? Are Americans really that bad that we need to incarcerate that many people? So, and it goes back to Jim Crow and slavery. I mean, there's a direct line. That's a whole nother conversation for a whole nother day.
Yes, we got like 5 minutes left, Rev. They might want to see if they want to ask any questions.
Well, I'm going to cut it right there then.
I have a question. I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
One is, do you have a physical location? And this is a Hartford-based program, out of which these programs are developed or are offered. And the second question is, how do you get people to you? what is the mechanism by which when they come out of prison, they find you? What is the line of communication that leads them to you?
Okay, so yes, we based out in Hartford. My address is 157 Charter Oak Avenue for right now.
Okay.
And the way that we recruit people is that I rely on Hartford Foundation for public giving to give grants. Right now, we're not doing anything right now because they haven't gave me a grant. What I do with my program, I'm spending out of my own pockets for right now, or I do side jobs for like people like my people. I mean agencies like my people, OPP, BHCA, and the Urban League. But like I said, parole officer will send them, halfway house will send them, probation officers, and other agencies that don't be dealing with the trauma issues. They'll send them to us. And you know, I have one cohort before the COVID-19, and 85% of them got jobs, didn't return to prison, and still doing great right now. And what's the other question?
Those were the two questions. You answered both of them. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay then. Any more questions?
I would love to, and I'm cheating a little bit because I kind of know part of the answer, but just so everybody can hear, like, what's next? Like, what's your dream for this? What would you hope to, if you could, you know, look into the next few years and just imagine what SCRIP could be, what does that look like for you? And what might you need to make that happen?
I had mentioned earlier, I want SCRIP to be the program. I want to make a big difference. What I'm trying to do is transition a neighborhood into a community. A neighborhood where they do a lot of shooting, they do a panhandle, they do all of that, into a community where everybody respects one another and support one another. And I want to address many with this trauma. Trauma is a multi-generational gene that, if not addressed, it will make us more aggressive, more impulsive, disassociate ourselves still. It'll make us have an impaired ability to adequately, assess risk and give us unrealistic expectations. So in order to get the real manpower, we will probably need, like, my whole goal is to get like a development center where guys could come there and be active while they're there with the wraparound programs and in order to accomplish that, I would need like a lot of resources.
Yeah. One of the things that we provide basic services in our halfway houses. What I don't see much of is this addressing of the trauma and some of the things that SCRIP does. And I think for a very, very small investment, we could have a program like this with facilitators trained through Edward in every single halfway house. So I would love to see that. I would love to see that in every halfway house, sober house that we have in Connecticut. It would then affect literally tens of thousands of returning citizens every year. We have more people under supervision outside of prison than we do inside of prison now. So that development and that training is going to be essential if we're going to keep them out. So that's one person's opinion.
And don't forget to let them know that the data is there's approximately 600,000 people being released from prison each year. Connecticut has 10,390. Out of that 10,390 got people, women and men who's discharged, 36% of them return back to prison. And SCRIP is not only dealing with returning guys who's coming home from prison, it also deals with the homeless who needs another chance. Everybody I got a second chance, but I'm just trying to address these type of issues, whereas, because when you see people who want to get high, they don't want to get high only just to feel good. They want to get high because sometimes they want to avoid some of those inner feelings that they going through that they don't know how to address nobody or ask for help. We got a complex. We want everybody to think that we could do self-healing. We want them to think that we see the results from this type of attitude. So this is why I'm trying to make SCRIP the program. I deal with licensed people, and I deal with, like you said, Goodwin College. They are tied to me.
Yes.
And I deal with professors that could go and show somebody how to really do with resumes, and not only resumes, know how to do communications and all of these important things so they could feel accepted and go out and be a changed person, like transform. But I know everybody is busy, and I don't know if anybody got any more questions. Mr. Frank, how you doing? My name is Edwin. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer any of them that you have, or Mr. Lou, whatever, or Mr. Bob. I know we're about to get off now.
I also want to say that if anybody thinks of a question later, right? If you're like, oh my gosh, it would have been so great if I'd asked that question, please let me know, and I can reach out to our two presenters and ask them. So don't think that this is your only opportunity to ask questions. I also invite you, if you have not had a chance to look at the SCRIP website and just sort of like poke around and see everything, that it's a beautiful website, Edward. It really is. It's a beautiful website. But it definitely like helps sort of round everything out and show all of the amazing things that you are doing and trying to accomplish in the world. So if you haven't had a chance to look at it, I'm going to send out an email to everyone who's here tonight. I'll send out an email sometime tomorrow, and I will give you the link to the website so you can check it out there. Reverend Williams, Edward, I am just so honored to have you all here with us again to talk more about SCRIP. And Edward, thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing your story and your heart with us. And we are so excited to see what Asylum Hill Congregational Church can do because this is a relationship now, Edward. You're not going to get rid of us. We are here to walk with you, and we are excited to find ways that we can support as well as grow and learn with you so that we can do everything that we can to be the church in the world. Yes. So thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Appreciate. And we'll grow too.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right. Well, have a wonderful evening, everyone. Thank you.
Okay, you too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.